All right, so basically I will present the work that we are doing and some data about something that Francesca already outlined a bit, but we'll go deeper in some aspects. So that's the Save the Children stance on education poverty. We consider educational poverty as a multidimensional concept. So poverty is usually conceived as unidimensional in general. Income or wealth of parents, or for instance, when we talk about education, mainly on school attendance, on results. And Save the Children look at education a bit differently as a multidimensional phenomenon. Is inspired by the theory of capabilities that probably you all know, and the work of OECD Better Life Index and the Convention on the Right of the Child. So we identified 4 dimensions of educational capabilities and the deprivation of them, which is the capability to know, to be, to live together, and to do. So just to sum up, because if not, it's going to be a bit long. The first is about, let's say, traditional or cognitive type of knowledge. And the second is about knowledge about oneself as a human being. And it's mainly related to the self-management, life skills, self-awareness, esteem, and also how one the child develop his own value, the confidence in itself, the ability of managing stress and other type of feelings. The capability to live together, which is much related to the sociability. As a result, the ability to communicate with others, negotiate, cooperate, having empathy, etc., etc. And the last one is more an operational one. So how is able to all these skills, also physical skills, and able to having a day-to-day function, basically. So starting from these assumptions, in 2014, we tried to develop a first index on educational poverty, and this index was basically focused on access, on quality education offered in school and out of school in each Italian region, aiming at promoting these 4 dimensions of capabilities. And we basically did an index by using 14 indicators from different surveys. At the time was ISTAT mainly, and the Ministry of Education that you will see there. So they're quite different. Some are on access to education since early childhood. Others are on quality of schooling. Others on frequency of out of schools activities like culture, sports, visit to theaters, and reading books, etc., etc. And then we made some change to this index by also introducing outcome indicators as a result, in particular the PISA low achievers. And so what I'm going to show you now, that is more interesting part in how we use this data. And we have 2 major publications. One is the, we call it Enlightening the Future, which is the main publication on educational poverty. And the other one is the Atlas of Children. That is basically an atlas book on all data about children in Italy. So the pictures I'm going to show you comes from the Atlas, the last Atlas that just came out 1 week ago. And are quite interesting because it recalled what Francesca Borgonovi outlined. So the fact that we have, this is the first slide is about INVALSI results. And it's quite interesting because we see a clear variation in regional terms. The south part, if you go on top or right, the south part is always, this is on mathematics, the south part is always particularly disadvantaged. We can also have a focus on cities. That's very interesting because if you look at the level of competencies measured by INVALSI, this is in the Italian language. From the children from the 3rd years of secondary, of lower secondary, and you will see that okay, just to understand the orange, the dark orange and the light orange are the 2 levels that are like the minimum. So if you are in this level, you are like a low achiever, basically. And the first bar is about the low socioeconomic status of parents, and the bar on the right in each city is on high socioeconomic. So you see the big difference in each city you have. Turin, Milan, and Genoa are in the north, and you see that there's big difference not only between them, but especially, I mean, they look the same when you look at the inequalities. And as you might see, when you go down and you go to Naples, Palermo, and Catania, just southern Italy, southern cities, you see that both children from low socioeconomic status parents or high income, more of them are in this low achieving status. This is what happens. It's a clear correlation. You can see the first on the left, you see the result of INVALSI in both mathematics and Italian in 5th class of primary, then in the lower secondary and higher secondary. And you see that there's a clear correlation in both Italian and mathematics in respect to the, sorry, I have a problem with, in respect to the, it was my daughter. There's a typical things that happens when you do this kind of stuff at home. And so you see a correlation in terms of the social economic status. It's obvious, you know, lower social economic status, also lower scores, and then you go higher. This is another interesting feature that is about early school living and the gender differences, because you can also see inequalities in terms of gender. So in Italy, early school living is 13.1%, is from Eurostat, and the median European 27 EU is 9.9. So you see that Italy is above, unfortunately, above this average, the European average. Of course, there's huge difference, regional difference. You see on the map on the left. Look at, for instance, this 17.3. That's Campania. It's a southern region, and Sicily is 19.4, which is probably among the highest in Europe. What is interesting, and you will see in the bars on top on the right, and also in the pattern, the trends, there is, of course, a decrease in trend, but unfortunately, in the last years, it stopped. And what is interesting to see is that the early school living is more, the incidence of early school living is higher amongst boys, is the green, than girls, the orange. And that's something that you can see also in other indicators you'll see later. This is another aspect that we like to check when we look at multidimensionality, which is access to early childcare, early childhood education, in particular from 0 to 3 years old, which is a very, a very important factors for later achievement in education. You see the map on the left. Again, you have very, very high differences in terms of access to public service. With the southern, with orange, more orange, that they have less places available, and two regions on the center north, which are historically regions that have high level service. Amongst them, there are also some experience that are considered the best in the world, in Emilia-Romagna in particular. And so we have the average in Italy of coverage of 0 to 3 early childhood service is 14.7. If you add the private sector, also we arrive around 20, almost 30, but well below the 33%. It is the target of the European Union, that it was in 2010 actually. What is interesting to see on the right side is because this is one of the policy that we largely finance through the recovery fund. And what is interesting is to see that the first installment of the recovery fund for that purpose has already generated projects. You see on the the green, the map on the green on the left, the little point, the dots, is about the project that have been admitted for getting funds for the 0 to 3. So we call Asili, which is like the nursery, the childcare. But as you might see, they're well distributed, in all the regions, while in fact, if we would like to close the gap, it should be much more concentrated in the southern region. And that's something that, okay, there's some reason that I'm not going to explain you right now, but data help us in understanding that too. So that's another thing that is really nice to see, because as we explained, we look at educational poverty as a multidimensional phenomenon. So we look also at some activities like reading outside school. And again, we see some very high differences and gaps between regions. We see the map on the left. What we can see also is there's a positive evolution. You see, you can see like up. There's this kind of books with these two, and you see between 2019 and 2020 there will be a decrease. The orange one is the children they don't read at all. So you see a decrease. One might speculate that can be due to the fact that they stay more at home for the coronavirus, and therefore probably they read more. But that's just a speculation. There's no data to support that. What is instead interesting is that we see a similar pattern with reference to other outcomes, like the bars, the 3 bars, just on the right of the map. You see that the percentage of non-readers increase when we have parents that don't have a tertiary degree. So it's the 60.2.6 is about parents that have maximum the lower secondary. And of course, those they have degree is 30, so it's half. So that the influence of the parents' education into the children's attitude vis-a-vis reading is very important. We see that girls are better reader than boys, and maybe this is also there's also some association with the fact that we know that girls have also better results in reading in PISA, for instance. And another aspect that is quite interesting is also the participations to sports activities or cultural activities. I'm not going to go to much details of it, but what is interesting to know is the purple bars on top that show you how many children from 6 to 17 years old did not do a number of things in the last 12 months. So almost 80% did go to a concert, music concert, 67.6 not to a theater, 62.8 not to a monument, which is, something quite dramatic if you think that Italy has probably the highest number of UNESCO sites, cultural sites. It's not difficult to find monuments, or for instance, museums. Half of them didn't go in Italy. And 60% didn't go to sports shows. If you look at precisely the sport activity, which is the map in green, 60% did actually sports activities, but basically 40% did not. So if you look at some difference in terms of social economic status, we can always see the same pattern here. So those that do not do frequently these type of activities are mainly those that parents have less means, in economic means in this respect, and also low level of education. So what do we do with all this data? What's interesting to see is that we feed policies, basically. And what we did in a recent past was to, first of all, to raise awareness about the existence of educational poverty and its multidimensional aspects. We did through the index, we did through this atlas that you see. So we basically say to legislator that poverty is educational poverty is a very complicated matter, which invests many dimensions and therefore needs comprehensive and holistic responses. Some results that we have from this awareness campaign and advocacy was the government, for instance, established a national fund called With Children to Fight Educational Poverty. And this is a fund that basically finances projects run by NGOs or CBOs in specific, the most disadvantaged areas, geographical areas in Italy. The government is adopting actually the educational poverty measurements as benchmark for policy planning and evaluation. So for evaluation of the budget laws and other things. So that's very important to being able to have that embedded in the policy planning. And Save the Children itself, of course, with other NGO partners, established dozens of educational centers, as we call spotlights, in the private areas in which we precisely do activities, different activities, that refers to different dimensions of educational poverty to precisely fight that phenomenon where, according to the data and the maps we saw, it's more present. One last thing about that, it's that you saw that in general, the southern region have higher incidence of educational poverty in the various dimensions. But if you look carefully at the different dimensions themselves, you will find out that in some dimensions, for instance, some northern region has issues and problems. If you also disaggregate this data, because some can do at provincial level, you will see that also, as I said, areas, provinces that are not in the southern part of Italy have high levels of educational poverty. I just give you an example, personal. I come from a province that is on the north part of Italy, is in the border between Italy and France, and it is one of the province with the highest level of early school living. So that's, that's the multidimensionality also permit you to, let's say, focus on territories and areas and see in which dimensions these areas are lacking. And so, because as I said, it's not just something that is referred to some specific areas or regions, but in some areas of educational poverty, you find criticalities in basically any province or area in our country. And of course, it's a matter of inequalities. And this type of data really help in planning holistic and innovative policies too. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian, to have led us to speak about needed resources to territories in order to face educational poverty, and because you remind something that even Director Ricci said this afternoon, we have to have a look in depth in the areas, because we cannot just say that there is a southern issue. Obviously there is, but it's not only this is not the only problem, and we have to go through deep analysis to understand which are the educational suburbs in Italy, even in the northern part. Now I will invite on the stage. Sorry, questions. Sorry. I ask if there are questions in, please. Okay, we make a question from the online, Mr. Sigalas, and then you, okay?
Yes, thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, Christian. Reflecting basically what Francesca said before, and the inherent bias in the data we collect and analyze, which are the bias coming from the research questions and so on. I mean, given that, you know, your data are not very surprisingly showed on average, you know, high levels of educational poverty in the South and Sicily and so on, which was more or less to be expected, even from someone like me who's not an expert on Italy. Now, the bias I can see is, of course, if you ask these kind of questions, you always paint a very gloomy and dark picture of the South, don't you? Perhaps not necessarily on education, but also an education which concerns us here. Now, but you know, we never hear about the flip side, perhaps of the good things about the side, which of the South, which I'm not going to say that they necessarily counterbalance all or the main important problems, but they're not taking perhaps into account. So it could give a distorted picture. For example, I don't know, this is speculation, of course, maybe there are lower levels of stress, or maybe students in the South are happier on average, I don't know. But if we only focus on certain things, we present the dark side. And I wonder if there's also a bright side, perhaps, that could show us. Thank you.
Thank you, but exactly, but that's precisely why we wanted to do a multidimensional definition and measurement of poverty. I didn't show you some data because I didn't have, I'm sorry, the problem was just, you know, few. The atlas is like, I don't know, 150 pages with 150 maps. So, but if you go through it, you will find that there are areas or in dimensions of educational poverty in which the South, in some region of the South, sometimes overperform, but largely the North. I give you an example. Basilicata, that is a small region in the South, has the highest percentage of schools with full-time school hours. That is a very, very important factor because which means that they, you know, after the courses, you can stay at school and study and do extra activities and so on and so forth. It is very useful. You see some regions that they have very, very good performance in terms of reduction of early school leaver or in increase in PISA results. So precisely, but I mean, unfortunately, from the map that I show you, it's you know, you see it's evidently, you know, the issue of the South evidently emerges. But we did actually we define educational poverty in this way of multidimensional aspects and measurement. It's precisely to show not only that in the North too, in some areas you have huge problems, but also that in the South, by contrast, in some areas you have very good experiences. And so if ones go through the documentation on data, they show, and actually we also testify that in dialogue with governments and see, for instance, that there are like very good practices in South in many areas, and therefore why not to take stock of it, no? And try to mainstream in other regions. So it's, I mean, we want to show complexity, because if we talk just one of two classical indicators, they will be south in one position and north in another. Easy. But if you go more into the complexity, you see a complexity of results. So in the north, you have big problems in many areas. In the south, you have very good experiences. That unfortunately I couldn't show. I mean, it didn't. It didn't be. You know, it was not out when through these slides and these maps. But you know, there's so many, so you can really find.
Thank you. I don't know if Francesca Borgonoio you want to say something, because they have written. She has written a comment.
Oh, no. I just wanted to say that I don't think I wouldn't use the word bias. More that you know, it depends on the choice of indicators, as Christian highlighted, or that you know, data should be put in context. So I think we're very well aligned in that sense.
Okay, thank you. I take the opportunity to say that our atlas is is selling now in libraries, and I give the floor to the other question.
Good afternoon. I have a question about the okay. I have a question about the poverty index, because many of the indicators that go into the index are available at most at the regional level, that is NUTS2 level. For example, indicators about cultural consumption come from Istat Daily Life Survey, indagine sugli aspetti della vita quotidiana, which allows at most regional aggregated indicators. So did you consider the possibility to scale the index at a lower geographic level? And if so, how?
Yes, we consider it, but as you said, it's complicated because some data, actually most of the data, do not have the possibility of being scaled down to provincial level. INVALSI, yes. The aspetti della vita quotidiana that you mentioned about cultural activity, no. So basically and there's another possibility too that we were exploring actually. It was an inequality adjusted index. You know, as for instance, Human Development Index was made like in 2010, that they actually developed the adjusted one for inequalities. We would like to have a focus on some specific areas in cities or remote areas. So for all that, unfortunately, the data of today make it not possible. So what we are actually asking and requesting is to the government, of course, and also the partners usually involved, which are like INVALSI first, then ISTAT and the ministries, various ministries, is to invest to create a database that will be disaggregable at the lowest possible level in geographical terms, and also in terms of inequalities. So to look precisely at what you said. There are possibilities because, as I said, the government decided to adopt educational poverty measures as part of the evaluation instruments for the budget laws, but there's also other opportunities coming from European funds. So we are pushing for having the possibility of this type of data disaggregated, and therefore do this type of index at much lower level.